Well, we have a trade to talk about. It's been a minute since we've had a big deal to really sink our teeth into. Matt Savoie to Edmonton for Ryan McLeod and a lower level prospect. We'll get into all that there is to get into about this trade, the players involved, the reaction, the style, what it means for the Sabres, all ahead here in the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is presented by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Very excited to come to you today on this Friday evening as the Sabres have made a trade. And I do believe this episode will go a lot better than the last one where I maybe jinxed myself, or I don't know what you want to call it, but I did a whole show about all these options that the Sabres had to add top six winger, third line center. I got into Vladimir Tarasenko a lot. And then an hour later, Tarasenko got dealt. Or was signed at least to Detroit. That will not be the case with this episode because we're talking about a deal that has already happened. And it's the third line center that we have been talking about. Not the name we've been talking about, but the concept, absolutely, that we have been mentioning. We're going to get into it all. Deep dive analysis of this deal. Maybe the most out on a limb, it might be the way I want to describe it, trade that Kevyn Adams has made in 4 years as their general manager. Is it 5 years now? Really, it's been 4 seasons worth for Kevyn Adams. Ryan McLeod comes to Buffalo in a trade. Matt Savoie goes out to the Edmonton Oilers. The Sabres are also getting more of an AHL guy in Tyler Tullio. A little bit more on him a little bit later on, but nothing major in terms of him being a part of this trade. In essence, it is Savoie for McLeod is the deal. And there's other news with the Sabres today. Henri Jokiharju, 1 year, $3.1 million contract. Quick take on that. We'll get some quick takes in on the other news. Jokiharju, 1 year contract means as a restricted free agent this year at his age, next year, he would be an unrestricted free agent. So I think he should absolutely be on the trade market, and the Sabres should be looking to deal him because it seems like he's going to leave for nothing in a year. This is not Sam Reinhart. It's not the same exact value as that situation, which was a similar situation where Reinhart told the Sabres, I'm only going to sign a 1 year deal and I'm going to go to UFA. Maybe Jokiharju did the same thing. You're not going to get what you got for Reinhart, but Jokiharju had a nice season. Did okay as a top 4 defenseman. On a good team, he's probably a third pair guy, but right shot defensemen come at a premium in today's NHL because they're getting rarer and rarer. So I do think you could get something of value for Jokiharju. I've got a trade idea for him, actually, that he's included in to get to a little bit later on. That's one bit of news today. 2 Sabres elected for arbitration. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Beck Malenstyn. Malenstyn just getting here, of course, and that deal will be pretty small. I wouldn't be afraid of arbitration if I'm the Sabres on that front. Luukkonen's a little more interesting. I would imagine the Sabres don't want to let that get to arbitration. I haven't seen a date for Luukkonen's hearing, but we'll be tracking that throughout the summer because that contract's going to be a tough one. And if it goes to arbitration, Jeremy Swayman went to arbitration last year or 2 years ago and did not get what he wanted. Got like a $2.5 million deal. Luukkonen on arbitration, I think, would mean a 1 year deal. I'd not actually read up on exactly how that works, but it wouldn't be long term. It wouldn't be a 7 or 8 year contract where someone else is deciding. It'd be 1 or 2 years. So we'll see what Luukkonen presents. We'll get into that a little bit more, the nitty gritty of his contract details and the arbitration, what that means, when the hearing is a little bit later on. But today's going to be all about this deal. The Sabres trade Matt Savoie to Edmonton. They finally make the prospect for player trade. Now, there's an instant reaction here that is very, very interesting. The instant reaction to Savoie for Ryan McLeod for the out-of-town hockey media. And that's not just, Edmonton writers, or I know Leafs Twitter has been in on this trade a little bit. The national perspective as well. The Sabres are getting laughed at in this deal. Outside of this market, I think they're getting laughed at. I saw multiple comparisons from people I respect. Mike DiStefano, my buddy from up at Locked On Leafs, Matt Larkin, who I love up at Daily Faceoff, both tweeted about the Martin Erat trade, where the way back when, 10 years ago, the Capitals traded Philip Forsberg, who was their number one prospect, to Washington for Martin Erat, and everybody knew at the time that's a horrible deal. You don't trade your top prospect for that player, and that comparison was made immediate. The big difference here, though, is Erat was a UFA to be. Like, he was a rental, and he was in his mid-30s at that point in time. McLeod, 24 years old. So that part of it doesn't line up as well. But really, before we get into McLeod specifically, the concept of the trade, to me, absolutely works. It is a player that kind of got pushed down in Edmonton because of all the guys they have. He's fast, and I think the Sabres have clearly represented this offseason that is something that they are very much interested in improving. Look at the players they've added. And the NHL has these stats now, NHL Edge with the player tracking and how fast guys skate, what your average speed when you're skating is, how many 20-plus mile per hour bursts you have. All this data is now being collected by the NHL. And if you look at the 4 forwards the Sabres added, or 4 of the forwards the Sabres added in the bottom 6 this offseason, and where they rank for top speed and 20-mile-per-hour speed bursts from NHL Edge, Beck Malenstein, 96th percentile. Sam Lafferty, 97th percentile. Nicholas Aube-Kubel, 98th percentile. And Ryan McLeod, he might be, I did see this take from Oilers Twitter, McLeod might be the fastest player in the NHL. He, at NHL Edge, is the 100th percentile. I think by definition, that means he is the fastest player. If you're 100th percentile, that means there's nothing above you. You're the very top. So they might have just acquired the fastest player in the NHL, but it's a theme here. They wanted, yes, tougher to play against in the bottom 6, more physical in the bottom 6, faster in the bottom 6. They are legitimately faster with these 4 players. And Zucker, by the way, has got a lot of speed on his own. I know he wasn't included in that data. I don't have his numbers off the top of my head, but I know he's a very fast player. It's a third-line center trade. I thought they needed it. I thought Peyton Krebs had been pretty disappointing in the last 20 games of last year when he had an opportunity to kind of rise up the roster a little bit, and he didn't really take hold of it. So, you know what, man? Like, you were a star prospect in Vegas, and, you've been a nice little energy player for the Sabres. And I honestly would defend Krebs because he's the one young player that I think Don Granato might have messed up. I really do, looking back. Not even looking back, he's still on the team, but, he's expendable now. I don't know that he's got a spot in the lineup. He might be the 13th forward on this team at the moment. But I think Granato might have screwed that up. Because look what he did with Thompson, and look what he did with Cousins, and look what he did with, Skinner. I know he's an older player, but how did he Middlestat? How did he turn around or get the most out of his young core? He gave them as many opportunities as possible. He played them at the top of the lineup, even maybe before they had necessarily deserved it. Remember, he used to play Cousins as a rookie against Sidney Crosby because it was the experience that he was gaining. He'd play those guys on the power play, put them with the best teammates. Granato would put those guys in the situations where they could grow. And Krebs, he never got that treatment. Krebs kind of got put with Okposo and Girgensons in a role player role on the 4th line, and he kind of sat there for 2.5 years. And I maybe there's still a development to be had there. He's at an age that Middlestat was at when we thought he was nowhere. He's at an age where Thompson was at when we thought Tage was nowhere. So it's not over for Peyton Krebs. If there's one lesson we've learned for Tage and from Middlestat, it's that you shouldn't declare Peyton Krebs dead at this moment in time. But I'm looking back and really thinking about him and like, man, they just didn't give him opportunities to grow. And maybe now he never will. He's now expendable. This trade pushes him down. Ryan McLeod is their third line center. Absolutely, positively. Adams, he got yelled at development camp yesterday by a fan. Make a trade, Kevin. Pressure was on. Can you be a GM that's able to close? And this is where I'm at. Did they overpay? Probably. You should probably get a better player for Matt Savoie than Ryan McLeod. I think it's fair to say that. Absolutely. I think it's totally right to say that. I also think it's fair to say Adams had to do this deal because you've got 5 first-round forward prospects. 6 now, if you want to count Consta who might, it sounds like he's close to NHL ready. You got 6 first-round forward prospects that are either in the NHL, close to the NHL, ready to make the NHL this year, or like 1 year away. And all of them almost are skilled guys. You just don't have room for them all. You don't have it. Savoie's a nice prospect. I liked him a lot. But he had been jumped on the prospect depth chart by Zach Benson and maybe also by Yuri Kulik. He was expendable in the Sabres organization because they have above him Benson and Kulik, and below him they have Östlund, Rosen, and now Hellenis. They just didn't need Savoie, and I don't know where they were going to put him in the future. I liked the idea of him being the third-line center, but that was kind of after the Sabres hadn't made any moves. For this season, I liked that idea. I didn't know how that was going to look, though. I love that they're not just trusting that 18, 19-year-olds are going to come save the day. Like, let's go. Let's go get an NHL player right now. Adams showing he could overpay. Be willing to overpay, not fall in love with your guys. I like that, too, because let's be honest. The Sabres probably have to overpay in trades like this. Maybe part of the reason why they can't make a Nietzsche's trade or a Nikolai Ehlers trade, where you're trading prospect and pick for a really good player, a great player. Those great players, I don't want to just keep beating the same dead horse, but it's true. They can't get great players to say yes to them. They can't get these guys to come here. They probably can't get Martin Nietzsche's to tell them that he wants to sign an 8-year contract. They probably can't get Nikolai Ehlers to say, hey, I want to take a 7-year contract. I don't know that they can afford to get guys like that in a trade or can get the guys to come here in the first place. McLeod, lower level player. If you want to make a trade like that, this is probably the level of player that you had to do it for. So I appreciate what they did. And I, on the surface, thought, ooh, it's a pretty hefty price to pay for Ryan McLeod. I don't think I like that. The more I dug in on Ryan McLeod, starting from a position of, wow, that's an overpayment, the more I dug in, the more I liked it. I'll tell you why. What did I find when I was really digging in on Ryan McLeod? That's coming back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Here on the show, we are presented by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is awesome. Check them out. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors, everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. I actually use it for just wipers, which is very easy for me. You get them in less than a week. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen. If you're looking for some more sports coverage heading into your weekend, check out Locked On Sports Today. It's free, available on YouTube or the Amazon Fire TV channels app for all your sporting needs. Ryan McLeod to the Buffalo Sabres. All right, let's really dive in. Actually, before we even get to McLeod, very quick on Tyler Tullio, who also was coming in this trade to the Buffalo Sabres from Edmonton. 5th round pick in 2020 of the Oilers, 5'10", 22 years old, right winger. Last 2 seasons in the AHL, 9 goals, 21 points. This past year before that, 13 goals, 26 points. This guy's probably an Amerks guy. I kind of would be surprised if he seems like a more skilled player that is having trouble putting up points in the AHL. Amherst guy, maybe he develops into someone who could be a tweener, like a guy that, is a call-up. But I think you're probably not going to see him play for the Buffalo Sabres. So don't have to spend a ton of time on Tyler Tullio, who's also kind of a throw-in to this trade. What about Ryan McLeod? What are the Sabres getting? Why did I like the deal? And by the way, if you found out this news from us, we were trying to bring that breaking news to you as quickly as possible. I do apologize to our texters. I was literally in the middle of a nap when they made this trade, though. But we got it to you as quickly as we could. And we had some nice chatter. I saw some good takes on this trade from Ryan McLeod. I did see some concern, too, about it as well. Looking at it, one texter said, loving this trade, watched him in the playoffs, really was impressed in the playoffs. Only remember him from the playoffs this year. Was another texter, seemed to be flying around. He did get healthy scratched a game, though, in the Stanley Cup final. That is worth noting here. Ryan McLeod of the Oilers, center, did get scratched in the Stanley Cup finals. He had 3 goals in 6 games, though. So I don't know that you want to say he had a bad finals. He scored 3 goals in 6 games. For a depth center, I think that's pretty good. Big reason why not only did he get traded, but that he was healthy scratched in the finals. Edmonton was loaded down the middle. It kind of was dependent for him on whether he was in the lineup or how much he played based on what they were doing with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins sometimes would shift to the wing. But when Nugent-Hopkins was playing center, 1 through 4, McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, Adam Henrique. No offense to Ryan McLeod. I like the player more and more than what I'm reading. He's not better than any of those 4. Edmonton's the best center team in hockey. So yes, hard for him to carve out a spot, and very understandable as to why the Oilers would want to get rid of him. You're definitely doing them a favor, right? No doubt. As much as I like this trade for the Sabres, I like it for Edmonton more. I think the Sabres are accomplishing something here, but it's a dream for the Oilers. The Oilers are trading a center that might not have even had a spot in their lineup next year if he couldn't shift to the wing. And I read some concern about whether he's able to do that. He might not have that versatility. He might just be a centerman. So Edmonton was kind of stuck then. They brought Henrique back. So what are we going to do with Ryan McLeod? I think it made a ton of sense for them. They're getting a good prospect in Matt Savoie, who we'll talk about in a second. But McLeod, we talked about the speed. Huge part of his game. Goals, not a ton. 12 goals last year in 81 games. The year before, 11 goals in 57 games. That's a little bit more what we're talking about. That's a little bit more of like a 17, 18, 19 goal pace, which is, I think, what you'd like to see. And both of those, by the way, were playing 14 minutes a night. I think he's going to play more than that. I think I'd expect him to be somewhere in the 16, 17-minute range for the Sabres. So even if he doesn't get better offensively, just the added ice time will probably see him be closer to 15, 16 goals, I think, next year. Point totals, 30 last year, 23 the year before that. So with the expanded ice time, maybe he could touch 40. And I think that might be, you would take that. I think you would take 40 points for him next year as your third-line center. The value of McLeod, though, I don't think is as much about the offense. Although, 24 years old, and I'll steal this take from the boys over at Expected Buffalo. I saw Anthony Chandra make this point that he played a very depth role in Edmonton. A lot of defensive zone faceoffs. McDavid and Draisaitl were the guys. The offensive zone start, that's where they're going. Defensive zone start, McLeod played there a lot more often. No power play time. No power play time, really, in Edmonton. The guy was asked to play a defensive specialty role because they have the best centers in hockey. So, on this team, especially with Dylan Cousins struggling so much last year, maybe there's actually not even maybe, almost certainly he'll have more opportunity to grow offensively here than he did in Edmonton. So, 24 years old, bigger role, maybe a little bit of power play time. Maybe the second power play unit would be right to expect from Ryan McLeod. There could very well be some added offensive opportunity, offensive zone starts, power play. He has 1 power play assist and no goals in the last 2 seasons. Edmonton just never put him out there. So I do like that I think there's more to come offensively for him. There could be than what we've seen with the Oilers. But this trade's about defense. This trade is about defense. He's not overly physical. Keep that in mind. This might keep with their theme of getting faster in the bottom six. It does not keep with their theme of getting more physical. Obi-Kubel is physical, and Lafferty is physical, and Malenstein is physical, and Greenway is physical. Like they've got physicality now in that bottom six. He doesn't add to that. He doesn't add to that, which is fine. You've already got enough guys that are doing it for you. McLeod is not physical. One of the complaints about him in Edmonton. But it doesn't matter. He gets defensive results. Stick checking, the speed ability, how good of a forechecker he is. He's very smart in his own end. I saw a whole shift clip from him against the Leafs this season. And in my dive and digging in, and he was playing against the Matthews line, and he's forechecking the hell out of the puck. He steals it, whips it back to the point. His defenseman loses it down low. He cycles down behind Austin Matthews, stick checks Matthews, stick handles in a box, gets it back to the point man, and the play actually ends up with him scoring a goal on the other side, in large part because he stole the puck away. He created a turnover twice in the same shift. I think stick work, speed, and intelligence makes him a great defensive player. The evolving hockey guys also definitely share that sentiment. I'll show that on our YouTube channel if you're watching some of the numbers on that. If you look at his hockey card on Evolving Wild and look at his percentile offensively and defensively. Offensive percentile for Ryan McLeod. Goals above replacement, heavy on this data. 50th percentile offensively. Look at defense, though. 97th percentile defensively. If you want to trust evolving hockey, and I tend to, if you trust the people that are plugging the data in on this, and I think this kind of goes in tune with what a lot of the Oilers people have said too. I think we could be talking about an elite defensive player here. I don't know if I've seen the Oilers people say that. They said he's a good defensive player. The numbers people have him, though, as an elite defensive forward. And I think that's going to help them certainly win hockey games this year. More than I think Matthew Savoie was going to help them win hockey games this year, even if he had been in the lineup. So, question mark offensively. Maybe there's room for him to grow. And some of the numbers would point to there is. Defensively, though, is where you're really going to get an impact from this guy. This is your shutdown centerman. This is your shutdown centerman on the third line. And if you want, on top of that, this is more of a minor thing, but the Sabres had been lacking of a kind of a specialty face-off guy, right? And last year for Edmonton, 50.8% for McLeod, which is very good. If you're anywhere above 50, a lot of the guys are between 45 and 46, 47%. He's probably going to be the Sabres' best face-off man. That might even have him on the ice at the end of games. If they're trying to tie a hockey game and it's the minute left and they're down by 1, I think he might be taking the face-off. He might be out there. Remember 3 years ago when Cody Eakin would be out there just because they wanted a face-off guy out there on those situations, but then Eakin couldn't do anything else after that? Maybe McLeod becomes their face-off guy that can give them a little bit of offense in those situations late in games. Last thing on Ryan McLeod. What does the contract look like? 1 more year, $2.1 million. Then he's a restricted free agent. So you're got a lot of contract control here for McLeod, who is from Mississauga, by the way. If you're ever wondering, hey, does that being from Toronto thing and maybe playing close to home ever work out? McLeod didn't have trade protection, but maybe, him being less than 2 hours away from his hometown helps have a long-term relationship here with the player as well. So the more I dug in, the more I like the player. If you just stare at his hockey reference page, you're not going to be impressed. If you look through some of the data, if you look into some of the plays he would make, the role he's going to serve, and the opportunity ahead of him in Buffalo, I think you're going to find yourself liking the player that the Sabres got in return here in Ryan McLeod. By the way, we're number 71. In Edmonton, and that number is available because Victor Olofsson is gone, so maybe we get another number 71 playing third line center. When we come back, what did the Sabres lose? Matt Savoie. Why I'm not panicking about trading Matt Savoie, although I will say I think it's going to work for him at Edmonton. But I'll tell you why I'm not concerned about them leaving Matt Savoie to Edmonton here. That's coming back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented on the show by Game Time. Game Time. I was looking at Game Time the other day because I'm going to a concert next week. Chris Stapleton, locally here at Darien Lake. Wanted to go see him. I've never seen him before. And checking out the Game Time app for tickets. It's perfect because like there's a party deck at Darien Lake I didn't even know about. And like, oh, party deck. Where is that? And I looked. I mean, I've been promoting Game Time for how long here, and how much I love the being able to see your seat. And I'd forgotten about that for a minute, so I'm googling and looking. Okay, where's the party deck? Where's the party deck? Because the website didn't really show it. I looked on Instagram, and they didn't have a lot of good pictures of the view. I'm like, wait a minute, idiot. Go to Game Time. I go to Game Time. Party deck ticket. There's the view right there, and they're awesome, and that's where we're going to be sitting next week for the Chris Stapleton show. So, Game Time app, it makes it so much easier to buy and sell your tickets. It's an authorized ticket marketplace, Major League Baseball. It's legit. Makes tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. Sometimes for events, they're even available after the event has begun. If you want to go last second and you want to check out tickets and the game started 10 minutes ago, maybe you just want to go for the second and third period. Want to go to a Sabre game in the winter where, hey, let's go to the Sabre game. That's $6.55. Go check it out. There's probably tickets available. And there certainly would be on Game Time. So check out the Game Time app. Last minute deals. Save the 60% buying last minute. There's zone deals. Saving more. You choose a section. Let Game Time choose the seats for you for big savings. Your purchase covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Check it out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres make a trade. Listen, you really wake the fan base up when you make a deal and everyone outside of Buffalo is telling you that it's an idiotic trade. There was a lot of that. Again, I'm not blaming anyone outside of Buffalo for looking at this trade and going, whoa, that's a bad deal. You gave up Matt Savoie for him? If this trade had happened to another team, one of their top prospects for Ryan McLeod, I wouldn't have done my due diligence on it, I don't think. And I would have probably tweeted something like, wow, that's a bad deal. Glad I'm not them. No doubt I would have done that. So I'm not upset with anybody that's making fun of the Sabres right now. And also, you know, there's a little bit of, can you even hurt me? You know what I mean? Like, okay, you think the Sabres are a dumb organization because they made this trade. You think the Sabres aren't properly run because they made this deal. Welcome to my world, buddy. I've been living in this for 13 years here. Think with Adams and this regime, you know, there's been questions for 4 years. Who's criticized the Sabres for how they're run more than a Sabres fan, right? You're not new here. This has been happening for years. So it is kind of funny, though, that they make a deal like this and you wake up the fan base. Like, all right, one big transaction. Let me get to know this guy. Let's get into it. We're finally making some type of swing here to get better. Oh, you guys are telling me it's dumb? Well, let's go. Let's go to war. Let's fight. Sabres Twitter is like after these guys right now. And there's nothing that gets the fan base woken up like pinning the Sabres against out-of-town media. That's how you wake the fan base up. That's how you get them engaged, which is kind of funny. So part of the reason that the reaction was so strong against the Sabres out of town was who they gave up. Matt Savoie. I do think, though, this is where, like, I like Savoie as a prospect, and I like him a lot. Skilled player, nice hands. I was screaming from the mountaintops a year and a half ago that the Amerks were out of their minds for not playing him in an elimination game in the playoffs over a seventh defenseman that played like 8 minutes. I like Savoie a lot, but the context required to evaluate this trade, in my opinion, goes beyond Savoie. It goes to what is the full scope of the Sabres situation and why is Savoie expendable? Why is a prospect, it was a top 10 pick, where all he's done is go to juniors and dominate in 2 years, why would he be expendable? The Sabres have the deepest prospect pool in the league. They have a team on a 13-year playoff drought that knows they got to win right now, and they have a hard time getting players to say yes to them in big trades. So, yeah, trade Savoie. Overpay for this deal? Fine. Why is he expendable? It's more about the prospects around him, and it's more to me that he's been passed. When he was drafted, top 10 pick, that moment, that night when they drafted him in the top 10 of the first round 2 years ago, he was the best prospect in the organization. He was. Since that time, he's done nothing wrong, but he's been bypassed by Zach Benson and maybe by Yuri Kulik. I would even maybe say probably by Yuri Kulik, because Kulik went right to the AHL and looked really good against men, while Savoie continued to play against kids and juniors. Not his fault. He wasn't allowed to play in the AHL. But I think Kulik passed him on the organizational depth chart. And Benson certainly did, of course, being in the NHL last year. So I got a guy that I don't really know what to do with him center versus wing. I've got two prospects that have passed him. One's already in the NHL. The other one's about to be in the NHL. And I've got three other first-round forwards behind him. Right behind him. With Noah Östlund, Isak Rosen, and now Konsta Helenius, excuse me. That's 6 first-round forward prospects. You just don't need them all. And it became clearer and clearer. They were having a hard time trading them. They've had him for a while. So, you move him out. Where are you? You're fine, prospect-wise. You didn't lose anything in your prospect pool. Because we've belabored this point to death. They don't have room for all of them. Their top 6 is 5/6 full for the next 5 years. Thompson's not going anywhere. Tuck's not going anywhere. Cousins is not going anywhere. Quinn, Peterka, that's 5. None of them are exiting the top 6 anytime soon. Who's the 6th guy? I got one top 6 spot available for the future, for the long term. One. And you telling me Zach Benson's not going to grab it? And if Zach Benson doesn't, there's Yuri Kulik to grab it. And if Yuri Kulik doesn't, there's Noah Östlund. If Noah Östlund doesn't, there's Isak Rosen. If Rosen doesn't, there's Konsta Helenius. Like, someone's going to do it. And I didn't mention Savoie there. That's with Savoie out of the picture. I just don't think they needed him. If he's a great player, then they'll miss him. And they'll look like fools, to be honest, if he looks like a great player. And it's possible they'll look like fools. Because is he going to play with McDavid? Is he going to play with Draisaitl? Or is he going to be their third line center, playing with Nugent Hopkins? I don't know what Savoie's role is going to be there. Or he might even be in the league right now. I don't know. But I just don't think the Sabres had a spot for him. I don't. So he was expendable. And you traded an expendable piece with value for the exact thing you had when you have a tough time making trades and you have a GM that has not proven the ability to make trades until really the last couple of months. I'm not going to be mad about it. You're not going to find me being mad about it. I'll agree with you they overpaid, but I'm also think it was a necessary move. They had to do it. Sure, they had to overpay for it. You're the Buffalo Sabres. That's kind of that's the bet you've made. You've created the situation in part where you want to make a deal like this to help your team right now. You got to overpay. Well, okay, then you overpay. You do it. You don't wait for 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds to come save the day for you. That's not what real NHL teams do. Real NHL teams go out on a limb. They go make a deal like this. So Matt Savoie, I don't think he'll be missed in the prospect pool. I think he'll turn into a good player, but I don't think he'll be missed because I don't expect that the Sabres aren't going to replace him. One of those 5 other first rounders, if not 2, if not 3, if not 4, are going to turn into really good players. That's where I'm at. Good luck to Matt Savoie. Edmonton kid, by the way. Edmonton kid, so I'm sure he's excited about going home. And as I mentioned, I like the move for Edmonton more than I do for the Sabres. I think this is going to be a win-win. I think it's going to be a win-win because they get a cheap contract, entry-level deal. They're up against the cap. I'm sure they didn't want to pay McLeod after this year $3 million contract, whatever he's going to cost. They don't want to do that. They don't have a spot in the lineup for him because they have centers 1 through 4 already figured out and they're already as good as anybody in the league. Edmonton gets rid of a piece that was even more expendable for them, and they get a prospect that I'm sure in their pool is going to be number 1. Like, he might have been number 3 in the Sabre prospect pool. I would guess, not knowing the Oilers prospect pool off the top of my head, he's probably going to immediately become the Oilers' top prospect. So good for the Oilers. He plays, last thing on Savoie and we'll wrap. Savoie plays 3 minutes and 55 seconds in a Sabre career. 1 game, 3 minutes, 55 seconds. I was going to look this up before the show. I'll do it after the show. I'll throw it in our text line. I'll tweet it out too. I want to bet that's near the fewest minutes any Sabres ever played that appeared in the game for them. How many could be lower than that? How many people have appeared for the Sabres? How many players have appeared for the Sabres in their history and played less than 3 minutes in their entire career? That's like a weird one. You will never remember him on the Sabres. Does anyone remember the game last year? You might have forgotten he played for the Sabres last year. He played like 2 shifts, 3 minutes, 55 seconds. That was still a weird situation as to why that happened. So yeah, Matt Savoie on his way to Edmonton. We got to trade. Now top 6 forward. Come on, baby. Let's go. 1 trade away from the perfect looking lineup. 1 through 4, you got Tage, you got Cousins, you got McLeod, and you got Krebs/Lafferty as your 4th line center. We'll spend more on that, though. I want to get into Krebs. There's a different Flyers hypothetical trade I like for him that I want to get to as well. His role, his expendability, and what other moves could come for the Sabres. All that on our next show. Hadi Kalakash going to record with him this weekend. He's back. Texted with him today. Locked on NHL prospects. So we'll talk. I'll ask him about Savoie. What he thinks about this trade, if he thinks it's a bad overpayment by the Sabres. Consta Hellenis as well. We'll talk about it all with Hadi, and that should be available for you either this weekend or on Monday. Thanks for listening to the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.